Hi and welcome to Peek a Book. This is the channel where I review books of all sorts. I love reading. I go to an airport, I pick up a book because I love to read. I go to a coffee shop, I want a book in my hand while I'm enjoying my coffee. If it's raining, I like to sit in the balcony, watch the rain fall and have a cup of tea and then read a book. And so I love reading books of all kinds. It's not just a certain subject or a few subjects. I love anything that opens my mind to new things that I can discover in terms of concepts, anything that explains the world to me, anything that is artistic, beautifully written. I love all kinds of books. Usually when I come across a book, I share it with my friends. I talk about it with a couple of friends that I know that like to read, and I tell them, give them a blurb, send some messages on WhatsApp. And I thought, why not go out to a slightly larger audience by putting these reviews online so that anybody who loves books and kind of has similar taste to mine can come here and get a sense of what to pick up next, or maybe just participate in the discussion about something I've said. So I plan to enjoy myself that way, and I hope you will too, and join the conversation and come back here and check out all the different reviews I'll be doing of different books. The book that I've picked up today to review is something that I found recently. It's called Helgoland. It's by an author called Carlo Rovelli. Helgoland really means sacred island, and this book is about quantum physics. It starts with a scientist called Heisenberg at the turn of the century or thereabouts, going off to this sacred island. It's a barren island off the coast of Scotland, and he goes there to crack a problem in quantum physics that's really been handed to him by Niels Bohr, who's a famous scientist that discovered orbits and electrons around atoms. Heisenberg goes to this island to try and figure this whole thing out. He meditates upon the problem and comes back and completely revolutionizes the world. And that's how the story begins. So this is really covering quantum theory from the historical period in terms of over the last century, how it's developed, how it was discovered, how it was elaborated upon. It talks about all the characters that were involved in its development, from Einstein, who contributed greatly seminal work towards quantum theory, to Niels Bohr, who started this entire process along with Heisenberg, and Heisenberg himself and a bunch of 20-something scientists that started this movement. So this is not really a science book per se. It's very poetically written. It's interesting in the storytelling of it, but it does go into the theory and the philosophy of what quantum theory is. So it's kind of a hybrid at some level, though it's not technical at all. It's not meant for scientists. You don't have to know physics. I know some basic elementary school physics and mathematics, and that's enough to get by to understand what he's talking about. But what's more interesting is the ramifications of this theory and what it means to us in terms of how we see our universe and the world. And that's really what this book draws out beautifully. It also demystifies quantum theory, because there have been a few theories and few examples that have become quite colorful and therefore quite famous and have taken over the visual imagination of how we think about quantum theory. One of them, for example, is the multiverse theory, and that's very popular with fiction writers for obvious reasons, because it can lead to very interesting storylines. But unfortunately, in this book, he explains that that's not really a completely accurate way to think about quantum theory, and it may not be playing out exactly like we imagine it in our minds and in our fertile imaginations. So while this also talks about the theory and the development of the theory itself and the science and the philosophy, like I said, he also talks about the personalities that are involved and kind of colors them out quite well, so it becomes an interesting story. We don't see just cold facts. He talks, for example, about Schrödinger, the famous scientist who contributed to quantum theory immensely, and he talks about his lifestyle. He had a girlfriend as well as a wife, and they all wanted to live together, so he had to pass up on certain opportunities, or he was denied certain opportunities in a university in the US because of that lifestyle. So that makes it a colorful story that's interesting to read in terms of the human characters behind the scientists that were actually involved in developing some of these theories. A couple of concepts that I found really interesting that he talks about, I'll mention, so that you can get a feeling for the book and what it contains in terms of the things that will engage your mind and keep you entertained. One idea that's explained is a famous one in quantum theory. If you've read anything about quantum theory at all, you probably have heard of Schrödinger's cat, which is really a cat in a box, and you can't really know whether the cat is dead or alive until the box is opened. Once you open the box, the cat is either dead or alive. But before that, in quantum theory, what really happens to the cat is that it's not either dead or alive. It's both dead and alive. And that's one way to think of quantum theory, because that cat is in what is called a superposition until you open the box. And that is quite a mind-boggling thing to wrap your head around. Another concept that he explains is entanglement in quantum theory. if two particles get entangled and then they are separated and sent half a world away, one is in China, one is in New York, they still continue to behave exactly the same way. So if one is red, the other will be red. If one is blue, the other one will be blue. And it's very difficult to understand how these manage to communicate or remain entangled across half a world without knowing what the other one is up to. These are some of the amazing facts you'll come across, and you could come across them on the internet as well, for example. But in this book, everything is contextualized really well to make a whole comprehensive understanding of the theory from its beginning to the current contemporary understanding of the theory right now. That everything in this universe is in relation to something else, and nothing is an independent entity that exists of itself. And all of these relations is what really makes up our reality and our universe. If there is no interaction with another particle or no impact or effect on another event, then really it's not part of the reality of our universe. And everything that exists in this universe is really interacting with everything else, and that really is the basis of its existence. And at this phase is when you start moving from science into philosophy and philosophy into science. The lines blur because you are finding certain mathematical equations that are allowing us to use quantum theory to our benefit, for our benefit. But it's not answering some of the philosophical questions, and eventually the development of this science hopefully shall get there one day. What I love about this book is that it's beautifully put together, and that's something you can't ignore, by the way. I love reading physical books rather than ebooks. Ebooks have their uses if you're looking at function over form, but if you're reading a book for pleasure, nothing like a hardbound book. It smells absolutely gorgeous. The pages are very high quality. The font, the printing, the layout, and how everything is explained combines with the writing style, the lyrical style, and also the philosophy inside the pages to make it a delightful read. It's a really small book, so it's just the right size to kind of carry around if you're going somewhere, if you're flying somewhere else, if you're going to a coffee shop. I hate the star system because I don't think everything is subjective. I don't think it works in that fashion. But if I really have to, if I have a gun to my head, then I have to say that I would give this book 4.5 stars. And the only reason I'm taking away that half star is because it's tackling such a difficult subject that this may not be for everybody. So thanks for watching. I really enjoyed this book. It's the kind of book that you don't want to just read once and put away. It's actually something that you might want to leave on your shelf. And once in a while, if you want to clarify something about quantum theory, you might come back to this book and read one chapter. And that's the kind of book it is. So if you think this is interesting, go out and get the book, read it. Tell me what you thought about it. Put your comments in the comment section. Tell me what you thought about this review. And I'd love to hear from other readers about their choices, preferences. I'd love your suggestions, and hope to see you back here soon.